Okay.
Okay, I think that we are recording. This is my first time doing it on Zoom, so we'll cut this out if it is weird. Okay, but hi everyone. This is Cece for another episode, another season of Raw Honey. I didn't think we were going to go into couples this soon, but I have been wanting to talk to couples for a while. And honestly, all of the people that I asked that were like single interviews, people just weren't available. So we'll go back into a single individual interviews at some point, and we have time to ebb and flow with the seasons. But so today I have my two friends that I went to school with, and they are married. They've been married for probably about a year, close to a year, coming up on a year, I think. And I've known them for a long time, and we all work in the same environment. And I think they're a great couple to start us off here. And so sort of the format will just be a conversation, but I have some questions that I have sent to them, and I'll probably pick one of them that we talked about, and then we'll just see how the conversation goes. If we have time for another question. But so we may go through 5 questions. We may just get through 2, and we'll just see how it goes and decide with the next interviews if we want to keep that format. But without further ado, I'm introducing Danna and Alex. And the first question that we talked about asking is, what's the hardest thing that you have been through as a couple? And so whenever you guys are ready, you can just start talking about, introducing what that is.
Yeah. So this is Danna, and Alex is here sitting with me. So we actually went through the hardest thing in our lives so far very recently, actually within the past couple of months. So it's pretty fresh, and I think we'll be able to talk about it pretty it'll be well.
Yeah.
So, Alex, do you want to kind of talk about what happened?
Sure. Yeah. So I had what's known as a manic episode associated with bipolar diagnosis. And I was in a state where I was pretty much delirious just because it was a very euphoric feeling, and I had all this energy that I had been struggling to have for a long time. So it felt good. I didn't really want to go to sleep. Like I would try to go to sleep, but after about an hour or so, it was almost like kidding myself, just because like I didn't really want to go to sleep. I was just laying down to try. And I mean, eventually, like your body can't sustain that, whether you have bipolar or not. Like if you stay awake for too long, you start to just enter a delirious state. So, I mean, I started doing things that I shouldn't have been doing, like in that condition, like driving to go pick up pizza or something like that. And like, I remember like driving, and like, I was genuinely like scared of a lot of things. Like there was right after it snowed too. So there was a lot of the salt out. And I remember like every piece of the, what?
Just as a pretense to that, for all the listeners, I guess, TC, we've been like, at that point, since we're dual military, we were not in the same location. So it was like, in general, a very hard year on us as a couple, because of training. Him and I went like 6 months without seeing each other, as most dual military couples have to go through that at some point. So that was like all before this incident. So it was already pretty hard. And then this incident occurred that Alex is describing, that when it happened initially, we weren't even together, which was probably, which is what made it really difficult. But once this occurred, I was able to be with him, but he can go on, I guess, explaining everything. everything
Yeah.
else. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I to make it quick, like I was just hypersensitive to everything. I mean, people were passing me in their cars because I was going so slow, just because everything around me was happening so fast that I just felt like I had to go slower to keep it all in order. But like besides that, like it got to the point where I had to be hospitalized just because I could not go to sleep on my own, and it was only going to get worse from there. And I guess like not having Donna there to help made it difficult at first. And I know like I had tried explaining stuff to her, but like I was so disoriented that it just didn't make sense. I told her I was like going to locations that I wasn't. And I mean, it's difficult for her too. I imagine she can talk from her side, like just how scary it was. Cause for me, I couldn't really perceive other people's feelings at that exact point in time. Like it was, like I was just all over the place, so I wasn't really thinking about how Donna felt in that situation.
Yeah.
And it was just an extended period of time, and it was. I mean, I'm thankful that I had a wife that cared enough about me to support me through a time where like I really didn't even engage with her too much, or even like really think about her, just because like I wasn't really in a position where I could think about that.
Yeah.
It's like I know like how I can only imagine how hard that would be for her to support someone that's not really acknowledging her. So that's definitely like kind of just a little insight into a part of our relationship where I felt very loved by my wife just because of the support she gave me in a time where like I couldn't really tell her or communicate how thankful I really was.
Yeah. When do you think that you started reflecting on that? Because was that recent that you were like, oh wow, like I really didn't know, like I didn't really know she was helping that much until till you started getting back to a more like present state? Like when do you think that happened, when you started reflecting on her feelings and her needs again?
Well, I think to be honest, like it took them a while to get a dosage of medication that could actually put me to sleep and in a state to where like it was actually restful sleep and not just completely sedation. I still was a little out of it for a while, but once they started getting me onto lithium, the medication lithium, and like once that dose got into my system, it really helped a lot with, I don't know, sort of just calming me down and sort of bringing me into a good balance. And and then with a little more time, they got the sleep medication down. And I think like definitely like somewhere near, to be honest, like the very end of like my hospitalization was where I really started to have thoughts about other people. Like I was very concerned about myself and like just thinking about like, oh, like how is this going to impact me or that? But I think like I started regaining like just sort of looking outward towards other people like near the end of it. And that's also part of the reason why they were okay with releasing me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's just because like I was starting to make more sense. I was starting to think about other people's point of views. So, yeah.
And what's sort of your version of that experience, Donna?
Well,
I mean, I obviously know it a little bit, but
from his, but yeah, it was shocking at first for sure. Like finding out, first of all, that he was being hospitalized while I was in a different state was really scary. And like obviously my first reaction was to go, like I need to go like right now. And luckily I was able to react. Things fell in place and I was actually able to go. Like the next day I got on a flight and went, and it was even more shocking seeing him in person, because it wasn't like the version of Alex that I'm used to. And it was scary a little bit because there were, in the beginning, I mean, there were moments when he didn't really understand like time, like he didn't know that I came, or like he didn't understand that I was there, or what time I showed up. So, and holding a conversation was really difficult too, just because his mind was racing in million directions. So it was, it was a little scary, but it was still Alex and it was still him. And I was just really determined because I was like convinced that I was the only person that could bring him back. Yeah. So like, in the beginning, before he was like admitted to the like behavioral health portion, when they were still trying to, when he was in the ICU, I was like at his bedside from the morning till they kicked me out at night. Cause I was like, can I just stay overnight? And they're like, no, we can't do that. Like you have to leave.
Yeah.
So like, I tried to bring pictures and other things. Cause I was just like, you see like movies and how people try to bring other people back. And, okay, I'm going to bring games that he knows. I'm going to bring this. I'm going to bring that. So it was just, even though it was like scary for me, I was just so in that moment focused on him and like getting him back that like else really mattered in that moment. But it was really, really a trying time for sure, but never did I like question our relationship, which is wild because I know for a lot it may be like a big point of like, oh, what are we doing? Especially because we've only been less than a year. So it was like, I almost expected I was to have those feelings, but like I never did. It was just like, oh, the obvious thing is, okay, we're going to get back to where we were. And yeah. And we did after a while.
Yeah. Now that you're sort of on the other side, it probably seems like it's a little bit of a cleaner ending, but there was just I remember just talking to you and just being so afraid of all the what ifs in that situation. Because you really just didn't know how things were going to resolve themselves, or if they were going to, and now it's crazy.
I mean, the what ifs that we're going through, I mean, as you remember, what's this going to be? How long? Timeline? When can I turn? When do I have to return? Because of like, I had my duties. I mean, as you know, like with my job, I have to come back at some point. But then what about Alex and his situation? Different duty station, and like can't even be together. All the paperwork that had to go into that, all of the legal people that had to get involved. It was just a whole operation. So many moving parts and with Alex out of it, it just felt like I had to take all of it on, and make it happen. And it felt lonely. Although it was the weirdest feeling ever, like having him there physically, but him not being able to do all of these, like be able to like perform the functions that normally would, and all the decisions that we would make together, just not me having to make those decisions on our behalf, on his behalf. So it was just it was feel lonely with having your partner still physically with you.
How do you feel like you coped with all of that, those intense thoughts and uncertainty and transitions?
Well, I was really lucky that one of my best friends, Gloria, from school was at that duty station. So it was amazing that she got to be there for me, and I was actually able to stay with her. She was able to support me emotionally, and just like I'll take my mind off of things. She was there to talk about it when I wanted to, and then she was also there to like, hey, let's watch a movie, let's do this. That I think I'm the type of person who's just like, when I'm fixated on something, like I will only do that. So she was amazing in that process, making sure that I don't drive myself into and then obviously having friends who checked in on me, like you checked in on me so much, and other people as well who I opened up to about this, what we were going through. And obviously my family, Alex's family, total huge support system, checking in on me every day, and it was beautiful to see how many people cared. And also like Alex's classmates, how many of them reached out and wanted, and like how willing they were to help. And then even with me, like some of them texted me to saying like, hey, if you need anything, like you need food, like you need us to bring you something. So it was just amazing, like how even strangers to me wanted to help, and how many other people who were affected by who have either had loved ones with mental health conditions or themselves struggled, were just really kind of touched by this incident and wanted to help. So it was it's kind of a beautiful thing to see in all of the craziness of the whole incident.
Yeah, I remember just thinking about it and just being like, when you get married, you don't envision yourself like really taking care of your spouse in this way until, you're way older or something else is going on. And it sort of just like really tests the commitment and the intensity of the promise that you've made, like,
yeah.
Did you ever feel like, is this, is that like, this is overwhelming and I just like, how do I do this? Am I even good enough to take on a role like this? Like, did I really know what I was committing to? Even though it's not like you don't love your partner, I don't think you ever truly realize the intense responsibility it is to really take care of someone, you know?
Yeah. So again, like I thought that that's where my mind would go, but it didn't. For me, it just became like this, like playing, growing up playing competitive sports, like having this competitive attitude. It was like another goal to tackle. Like it was another thing that I had to be good at and I was going to be good at. It was just like all right, this is the task, like go. I didn't even have time to honestly feel pity and pity myself. Like I just have the time or like honestly emotional capacity at that moment to do that to myself. And it felt better to be purposeful and be productive toward like keeping Alex, like helping Alex and helping our relationship, because I mean, we're a team. So, and I know in the future, like, and that's the whole thing about relationships. Like one person will have to pick up slack at one point or another throughout the relationship. And this was just my turn. And at some point in the future, like it will be Alex's turn. I'm in a low spot. So that's the way I viewed it, and didn't even like have time to alter. And we did talk about it too. We were like, wow, this is a true test of our vows, marriage vows. And we're just gonna tag team it out throughout our relationship, because I mean,
Yeah.
That's how it be.
Yeah. I think it sounds like you were able to do some type of compartmentalization and just focus on what was in front of you. And luckily, you guys are on the other side of it and it's becoming manageable. I think the thing that I was always worried about was like, what if this is like the extremity that it was in the moment? Like, what if that's forever?
Yeah.
And so I think that if it was looking like a chronic thing, I think that's when eventually you would maybe start becoming a little like just doubting of if you were able to handle it or anything like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think because things perfect, but because things did work out in the way that I wanted them to.
Yeah, that's true.
It's I did this, like,
yeah,
this is what hard work can do. But I know, because if it didn't turn out that way, I probably would have been like, I don't have the ability to do this. I'm not, like, how am I going to do this for X amount of years?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What about you, Alex? Did you anticipate or after the thought think about, what Danna's thought processes were, or what were you thinking? Do you remember any semblance of your own thought processes about your guys' relationship?
So yeah, definitely. I mean, I was just really thankful to have someone fighting in my corner. I mean, especially when I wasn't in a position to understand how much work she was actually doing on my behalf. And I think that it was definitely, I mean, it was scary for me too, especially as, throughout the process, there were many points of like, I would have the highs and lows while I was trying to get adjusted, and I would understand, and I would see all the effort that Donna's putting in, like bringing games, like playing with me, like in like the limited time that we had on a daily basis, and it definitely like it means a lot to me, and I know that's Donna, like that's. Like I would expect like nothing less of her. Like not that it was expected, but just that she's that type of person that she would go to the extreme to help someone that she loves and to be there for them. So I wasn't at all surprised, like after the fact, to know that she was in my corner the whole time. But I mean, I definitely wish that I could have been able to like acknowledge all of her during the time, but I just wasn't in a situation where that was a possibility. But like the way I show it now is just trying to be there for her as much as I can, and even just doing small things to help alleviate some of her workload. Whether it's just like doing a little more around the house, like when I have more free time or something like that. But.
Yeah. And do you feel like just you guys going through this extreme test and seeing how you showed up for each other, do you think that has sort of brought like a new type of understanding, or not understanding, but like just like the way that you guys are present with each other, because you guys have been dating for a long time, so like the natural complacency and some of the resentment and things that aren't addressed can start to build up. Do you feel like this sort of almost refreshed your relationship in a way, or do you think your relationship was always pretty present and full of like, meeting each other's needs and everything like that?
Yeah. I'll let Donna.
I think it added like a new level of trust and like bonded us in a way that it just, we always knew we were going to be there for each other when the time, like when time, I mean, at school, there were times when things were we had pretty low lows at school, but I mean, obviously nothing compared to this. So just going through this kind of reaffirmed that we have this strong bond, and I don't think it refreshed our relationship in any way. We were always pretty like, we've never really like fought much or had we bicker here and there because of how long we've been together. Like the little things about once you know someone for so many years, like little things can set you off, like not on the couch or something like that. But other than that, we've never really struggled like some couples maybe have in that respect. But I think that going through this definitely has, I don't know, we just like flow together now and like function. And I think another thing though that it's taught us is what the next test is making sure that we maintain, and something that I've been trying to make sure that we do is like we're equals and we're partners. And like, although I had to pick up the slack for a little bit, we're going to return back to like being equals. And like, we're both caretakers of each other, but I am not like the caretaker. I want to make sure that like we continue to make decisions together versus me like babying in any way. I need to remove what role I had to take on while he was in a different state versus now he's like here, he's present, the medication really helped. I need to make sure that I take a step back and let us be equals again. And that's what I've been kind of making myself do, and checking in on myself to make sure that I am doing that. And so that's like the only thing that it's added the fluidity in our relationship, but it also has made it a little more complicated since I had to go from that main caretaker role to now us being like total. So.
And what sort of led you to that understanding or that important reflection about roles in the relationship and sort of what roles need to happen at what times? You know what I mean? Like what sort of made you aware of how important the transition was back to the way it was before?
I mean, I guess just us talking about the future all the time, because a lot of what we did, I was trying to be, when he was in the hospital, what we would talk about a lot is the future, because I was trying to do like stay positive, and we would talk about even like in his state, he was very euphoric, and we talk about, oh, like we're gonna go to Europe, we're gonna move here, we're gonna move there, and just even though some of those ideas were really out there and wild, I would entertain them because it was something that was making him happy in that moment. But it made me think a lot about the future in general, and I knew that it wasn't. Alex is a very capable man and is very smart, and I was just thinking like, no, I can't, once we're through this, like I can't box him in. Like he is going to need to also learn how to cope with this and learn from it himself, and the only way to do that is to let him be himself and like independent again. And he can't have the crutches on all the time too. And I just, it was like constantly the us discussing the future made me realize like the future that we want won't be possible if I continue with. Yeah. So that's kind of what made me very aware of like how I, of my role, like within the relationship. So.
And do you think both of you, do you think that you're going to have to continue to work through just coming back to or trusting his independence and Like, do you think that's something you guys are going to have to work on for a little bit, just because you're going to have these resembling tendencies to maybe hover or be afraid that he's going to do something, and then on Alex's side, feel like he's also going to go back into something? Do you feel like you're going to have to work through those tendencies to fall back into what it used to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely always that possibility. I mean, a lot of what's going on right now is still changing. So, for example, like my sleeping meds, that we're in the process of adjusting them downward with like a long-term goal of eventually coming off them altogether. But I mean, there's periods of time during those changes where you have to be kind of like on the lookout, just to make sure that nothing's slipping, like while you're taking away some of the meds that were potentially helping in a certain area. So I mean, it's definitely like there's always that part's always going to be there. But I mean, I think we try our best not to entertain that unless the situation comes to it. Like so far, everything's been going great, and that's one of those things that like, well, I'm pretty confident that I know Danna can handle it, just especially based off our last experience with it, and like I know that it's always a possibility that you have to reassume that role, but I think we're on the right track, and I'm confident.
I think there's like because we still don't know what the trigger necessarily was for and because of how sudden, like how it was within a matter of days that everything happened, like the psychosis and all of that. Not knowing the trigger, not understanding the time frame, not understanding so many other factors is scary because you don't know when it's going to happen again. And for me, not being present when it didn't happen is I do have this fear in the back of my mind, like, oh, when will it happen again? I mean, this time I'll be more prepared because I'll know what to do, but it's always there, and it kind of does scare me, like when we're not together. That just because like we don't what made it happen, like we still don't know, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it with his new medical team. We're trying to figure it all out, but since we don't have that answer yet, it's a huge what if, or no, not a what if, when, hopefully never again, but you never know, especially like Alex said, with the constant, we're adjusting the dosage of his medication. So it's like we try not to think about it, like he said too, but for me, because of how, it wasn't a traumatic experience, but it was a very like emotional, I do, in the back of my mind, really hope that it doesn't happen again. But we're both aware that it's a possibility for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that if it is, I know the diagnosis is still, I thought it was still pending a little more than you guys were for sure about, but just, I know you are assuming, I mean, unless you know for sure that that's what it is. I thought you didn't.
Yeah, we do. They're just, I mean, with the Army wants it done a certain way.
Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah,
that is pretty solidified. It's just they're within that. There's a whole array of like medication that you can take, and what stage you're in within the diagnosis. Like there's just so much, and it's been a big learning curve too for us, learning about the condition and learning about the different medications available. It's also been, neither of us have really like delved into like these different mental health disorders before. So
yeah,
it's been eye-opening in that respect too. So
yeah, I feel like there's a lot of interesting shows out right now that are really trying to hit on lifestyles that have either it's like a mental disorder or it's a some type or it's like being on the spectrum, like autism, like all these different shows that are showing the lifestyle and the family care plan situation around people that are going through these type of things, and it's really helpful to see that. But it also kind of makes me realize at the same time that like everyone, like mental health is like everyone is understanding their own mental health all the time, or they should be, because we're so complex as humans and we have such unpredictable childhoods a lot of the times. And if you're not aware of the fluidity and the attention and the reflection that's needed as a human being on your mental health and your behaviors and your relationship, like you're just kind of like you're living on a time bomb kind of situation. So even though it's really hard to have like a serious mental health issue that requires medicine and requires a lot more attention, I think that it may bring you guys both into understanding of mental health as a way of life instead of just like a emergency situation. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree, because now even with this, like I've been more aware of my own feelings and what I'm going through, and I don't think it's as scary anymore for either of us, like seeking help, and like with whether it's therapists, psychologists, like psychiatrists, anyone, like we're just less afraid of this whole and you know, like in the military, we're trying to destigmatize all of it. So I think it's been, in a way, like to try to look on the positive side of everything that we've been through. Like it is good that we are now open to and accepting of all of these things, and I hope that it continues to go that way, like not just in the Army, but like in like humans in general are just more open to discussing and open to their own feelings. And because I think as we can see, as we see, it causes like a lot of pain if you don't come to terms with what you're going through or meeting your own needs. So I think it's good. And even though I think after all of this, I'm open to like seeking help through like therapy and stuff too, for myself, to like check up on myself too, not necessarily for it, like you said, in an emergency situation, or it doesn't have to be something negative that happened. Just to be able to have that as an option is good to know.
Yeah. It doesn't just have to be because everything's going wrong. It can be because you just want to take care of yourself. You just want to be aware and have help for just the transitions of life and even just the day-to-day situations that are out of your control that take a lot of awareness and tools to really embrace, instead of being afraid and being angry and being whatever unpleasant state that we tend to fall into when we don't have any reflection and any awareness and any tools to get through. So I'm all about it, obviously. I think anyone who talks to me knows that very, very early on. Yeah. And I don't exactly know, because I know different therapists I've had are like, well, the goal is for you not to need us anymore. That's the goal. And I'm like, and that's not all of the therapists I've had have said that, but I've always, for me, it's like, I think the goal shouldn't be that I don't need a therapist anymore. I think the goal is that I don't need to continue processing and talking about the same thing forever. It's like, because the life traumas and the life stuff, that's never like, you're never going to stop going through those, or the really intense transitions, or grief, grief and stuff. Different things are just part of life. And so you can't be like, oh, well, the goal is so I don't need anyone to go through those again. It's like, no, there's so much that is new that we have to go through in this life. So I think that having a professional output is really helpful. And as long as you're processing whatever that event is in a certain amount of time and you're seeing progress, I think that's fine. But I think having a therapist through that is for a long time or forever, honestly, is what I think, where I think we need to start heading as a society, because it also really alleviates the pressure you put on your partner to sort of be your therapist. And like you were saying about caretaker roles, it can turn into that if you are so heavily relied upon as your partner's emotional support and your partner's venting source and everything. You can start becoming their parent in a ways. And you take away the beauty of your romantic relationship. So it's definitely important to have professional outputs that are not just your partner.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree with that.
But I think that we have talked about a lot of stuff today. And I know we didn't go through all of our questions, but I think you guys have such a unique situation that this question just sort of evolved into like so many different questions being asked. So, and we're sort of at our time limit here for what I like to keep the podcast at. So is there anything you guys like to say before I just give a closing statement?
Well, I just want to say thank you, C, for having us on, and it was awesome getting to talk to you.
Yeah, and it's honestly great to just, although we've talked about this so much together, like Alex and I have, being able to talk about it in this set has been interesting too. And like hearing what, even though we're sitting next to each other, but some of the things that Alex said were kind of new and he hasn't necessarily expressed it in that wording, that type of wording that he me before. So it was like, it was really cool to be able to listen to him answer your questions with like, while I'm staring at him.
Yeah, exactly. The interviewing process opens up a lot of perspectives that you don't necessarily have the opportunity to go into when you're just talking to each other. So I've really enjoyed it being the interviewer. And it's really nice to interview people I know, because I always learn something about them and their experience that I just didn't really know before because of the setting we were in. It just didn't allow this type of conversation. So I'm so grateful to know you guys as a couple, to know you individually. And you're very inspirational, the way that you have handled this situation and just really embraced all of the uncertainties of it. And I think it's really important to have couples that you are mentored by and mentor, simultaneously. And I feel really lucky to have you guys as friends.
Oh, well, we love you, Cece.
Okay, but that is the end of our show, and I'm going to stop recording pretty soon. So I will see my little audience later. Bye.